Welcome back to the Midnight Report. We're going to be doing part 2 of the John Ramsey interview with Ashley from Crime Junkie. The first part was really good, some great questions. We talked a lot about the phone call, some of the events leading up to the actual day. Now we're going to be talking about some of the more legal stuff. John is going to talk a lot about the police in this section of the interview. We're going to try to hit, again, another 20 to 30 minutes of this interview. So let's dive into this interview. We're going to be talking about the attorneys, some of the legal counsel that the Ramseys were getting, and even some of the connection to the DA.
Left the house that morning after we found JonBenét and never went back in that home. We were staying with friends. Friends took us in, and a lot of our friends were there to support us.
Yeah.
And the police came several times, and we sat and talked to them.
So I believe that John is referring to, so after everything had happened at the house, they find their daughter murdered, and so then they went to them, stay with friends, and this is the part of this that gets very interesting. So from police reports and Steve Thomas's book, what we hear is that Patsy basically was not even able to get any type of talking done to the police. She was so inconsolable. She was mentally not able to do any of these interviews, which is why the Ramseys, that this was their excuse more or less, that they didn't end up doing formal interviews with the police for months. This was kind of their excuse that they weren't mentally able to do that yet at this point. And you can make arguments of, well, again, it's very close to when your daughter was found murdered. This is the best time that we're going to be able to find who did this, bring them to justice. You're going to have to power through it to try to give the police some sort of information. John also is said to not be that helpful, like telling them a lot of information that wasn't all that relevant. From what I found from Steve Thomas's book and the police reports is that a lot of the information that the police were able to build into this story and what actually happened more came from their own research and less from these quote-unquote interviews that were not like formal interviews. These were not sit downs. These were not breaking down everything that happened that day. It was getting as much as they possibly could. We also know during this point, they started to say who possibly could have been involved. The police would then start going through all the people that they listed. And so when we start getting to the point where John starts calling out the police, I want you guys to know and remember that every person that Patsy and John named, the police vetted. They, made sure it wasn't them. They had alibis or they were not able to do it. They didn't match up with details of the case. So, for instance, one of the people working for the Ramseys inside of their home as kind of like a assistant, I guess, more or less, or somebody that was taking care of the house, taking care of the children. She was one of the first people that was put up as a possible suspect. She was almost instantly cleared. So I want to point that out there that at this point, what they're talking about, John is acting like they were very cooperative with the police. That wasn't really the case at all. They, for the most part, didn't talk all that much with the police in terms of relevant information.
Because we trusted the police. We think, my God, they're our saviors. This is in their hands, and we trust them.
They didn't really talk to the police like I talked about. For instance, if they trusted the police so much, why did they wait so long to do formal interviews, to cooperate with the police? They just didn't really do that. Now, like John's going to say, they did cooperate in terms of getting writing samples and DNA like stuff. Like they did cooperate to an extent, but not to the fullest extent.
And I had gotten a call from one of the fellows I worked with. He said, I got a call from inside the system. Get the best defense attorney he can get his hands on because they think he killed his daughter.
This is actually really important. I'm kind of surprised John brought this up. So what John is referring to is we know from reports from Steve Thomas, the police reports in general, that a lot of information was being leaked to the Ramsey camp. And this basically confirms it, that the Ramseys believed, right away that they were the suspects. And that's why they went and got legal care, which I don't blame them at all. A lot of people give them criticism for getting, legal representation right away, which I think makes a lot of sense. You want to do that just in any regard. But I think the thing that so many people have issues with is how much the legal team just did not allow the police to get any information from the Ramseys, have interviews, blocking them. But it's interesting here because it tells you right away from an early stage that the Ramseys had a lot of connections, or at least their legal team did, with the DA, and even had people leaking information to them. And I want to point this out. The police did not have the Ramseys as their prime suspects for a good amount of time. Now, the FBI told them they should be looking at the parents. They're the most likely. And the odds favor that the parents were somehow involved. If not, they were behind it. So all the evidence would point to, okay, maybe the Ramseys should be the prime suspect as of right now. But that was not the case, especially what he's referring to in this first 24 to 48 hours. The Ramseys were absolutely not the prime suspects. The police were vetting other leads that they had, people that were being told to them by the Ramseys. So this is like, yes, I think the Ramseys were being suspected at this point, but they were not prime suspects, any of that stuff. John Ramsey is making it out to be that, like, the police just instantly went for the Ramseys and that was the end of it. They didn't go for any other leads.
This is like the next day. And I was like, unbelievable. So anyway, the police would come to the house and we'd talk to them as much as they wanted. They'd ask questions and we did the best to answer them. And then they said, one of our friends that was there, bringing food and help, comforting stuff, was a former attorney with the district attorney's office. And he was kind of
Just a little bit of that connection there. Former attorney of the district attorney's office. I talk about the DA a little bit in my documentary, how it seems like there's a little bit of corruption going on there. But we'll talk about that as we go further into this. I know I'm stopping a lot. I just think this portion of the case is so important that I don't want John to kind of shift the narrative away of what the actual case was, because he's doing a lot of like building up towards the police were completely against us from the beginning and they did not do a good job
observing things,
And I want to say the police didn't do the best.
Yeah.
So.
And the police were saying, well, we need you to come down to the station. Please come here. We can't. We're secure here. We're safe. Patsy's sedated.
Okay, so this is the excuse. This is very important. So the reasoning for them not coming to the police station had more to do with the idea that Patsy could not do it physically. But I want you to think about John Ramsey's own words there. So we couldn't go to the police because, well, we're here. We feel safer here. This is about getting your daughter. And for any other normal person, if I was, even suspected of a crime, I would be brought into the police station and I would be, interviewed, all of that kind of stuff. That's just how the law works. The fact that they were sitting here going, oh no, you guys got to come to us and we're going to set all the terms for interviews and any of this information. This is the kind of stuff as to why people are so suspicious, myself included, of the Ramseys because of actions like this. Your main priority should be finding out who killed your daughter, who did this horrible atrocity to your family. And even if, yes, you are suspected as being maybe part of this. Now, they weren't the main suspect at this point, but they were on the radar. They were suspects. Why would you just deny something like this if it wasn't because, A, you don't have your facts all straight at this point, and you're also a little bit worried about what the police think about you? That's the only thing that really makes sense to me. Saying the idea that Patsy was too sedated, she couldn't do this interview, any of that stuff, it doesn't add up with the actions of, okay, a couple days later, she's on CNN in front of the entire world. It just doesn't add up to the actions. And so I think that's really important.
In bed, she's not capable of getting dressed and going down to the station. You come
She says
here,
all this,
please.
but then goes on CNN.
Oh, no, we need you to come to the station. Well, why? And this, I think, was Linda Arndt.
Because this was normal protocol. That's why they wanted you to go to the station, because it's normal protocol for people that are not even suspects, right? These are people that are witnesses to what happened in the household. It's just normal that you would be told to try and come to the police, not the other way around. That's not how the law doesn't cater to you. So
Now that I think about it. And then Mike stepped in and said, time out. Because he knew the police department. He'd worked with me before. And he said, we'll get back to you. We're not coming down to the station today. We'll get back to you. And
I don't blame them for lawyering up and getting legal advice. And from a legal perspective, if the idea is, let's buy some time so that we can get our story straight and that we can, be more composed, fair enough. My biggest complaint with this is, why does it take till April to get an interview?
the next day, and I'd gotten that call, which I hadn't told anybody about, that I needed to get a defense attorney because the police thought I killed my daughter. This is the day after. They hadn't even looked at evidence or looked at our family history or anything. It was just like, it had to be the father. It's always the evil father.
That's not even close to what happened in this case. That is just fabrication. In John's own words from the first part, that is fiction. If you want to read any of the documentation of this case from the other side of the fence, from the police's side, from a middle ground, it's quite clear, for instance, that the police interviewed neighbors that were close by. They interviewed people that would have had access to the actual home. This is just not the case, that instantly they said John Ramsey did it. That's not what happened. It's because of the actions that then took place, how none of their leads were going anywhere. Anyone related to this case, anybody that was being told could have done it, but the Ramseys was being cleared. The only evidence pointed to the Ramseys or maybe some intruder that is unknown. So, of course, the Ramseys start going to get more heat when they start doing things like a CNN interview. They're avoiding the police, all this other stuff.
Were they thinking it was you?
Mm-hmm.
So
This was Linda Arndt. I'm sure that
Linda thought it was you, and then
Yeah.
this idea of Patsy comes from someone else?
apparently.
Okay.
Again, I think it's a good idea to question him on this, because from all we know, this is not the case. This came a little bit later. Like, there was probably people at the police station that were already suspicious of the Ramseys, but it was not like they hadn't made this said, oh yeah, the Ramseys are who we're looking into at this point. Wasn't the case.
And so our focus was to get JonBenét buried properly in our family cemetery in Atlanta, get back to our family for support.
So they're worried about getting support for themselves, not about getting, justice or finding out the person who did this to their family, that destroyed everything in their lives, uprooted them living in Boulder, Colorado in their house, cooperating with the police. They're worried about going away from the crime scene. They're worried about getting support for themselves and their family. It just rings hollow to me. And I don't know if that's because I feel like I would act completely different. You never know in these scenarios of trauma and tragedy, but it doesn't come off how you would normally expect people to act. And that's why they're so suspicious, because of a lot of the actions. It's one of the things I talked about in my documentary is that they might be innocent, but they are the most guilty looking innocent people. And right now they are innocent until proven guilty, of course, but that's just the way I look at them. Their actions don't help them.
And we did that within days of this happening. And what we learned, this was part of what made us really mistrust the police, was we went back to Boulder to get Burke back in school after we buried JonBenét, and to help the police.
So, okay, let's put this into perspective. So the Ramseys, they go to Atlanta, they do the CNN interview, they tell publicly, they go, okay, we're going to cooperate with the police, all that stuff. The Ramseys had already known and had been informed that, okay, people were coming to interview them in Atlanta, they were already there. The Ramseys then do not tell the police, they don't tell anyone. They secretly go back to Boulder, Colorado with a different friend that was not known to the police at this time. And so they completely circumvented the police. The whole idea that they went back to Boulder, Colorado like normal people and were ready to cooperate, it's not the case. This is even further justified when you look at the idea that they didn't interview until April. They literally, the only amount of evidence that they could get interview-wise was with Burke, and that's because they got backed into a corner legally. They couldn't get out of it.
And our attorneys, who Mike had brought in on his own, he had said, John, would you allow me to do some things here that were necessary? When we did this timeout, we're not coming to the station. I said, yes, absolutely. So the next day he's introducing me to my attorney. One attorney can't represent both parties. So Patsy had to have an attorney.
We have these crime junkie rules, and
I will say, I think regardless of the way you want to look at this case, the legal team for the Ramseys did a fantastic job. I mean, the legal team gave the Ramseys a ton of time to formulate what their story was. Truthful, not truthful, we don't know. But they gave them a ton of time to, compose themselves for this interview in April. They did a great job of representing the Ramseys. So for everything you want to say, the legal team did a really good job. I will say one thing, the Ramseys were smart to get legal team early on, something a lot of people do not do, and it comes to bite you. And Ashley's going to kind of say that here.
One of ours is always get a lawyer. So like, first of all, I would have done that day one.
Yeah, and
Our other is we always say like, you don't know everyone inside and out 100%.
yeah, that's true.
But did you ever question like, does she know something? Did you guys ever have a moment in private where you're like, or never, ever?
Never, ever. Patsy had survived stage 4 ovarian cancer, was given the gift of life.
Okay, so the question, Ashley very slyly threw this in here. I thought that was actually really, it kind of caught me off guard a little bit the first time I watched it, is she asked John, did him and her ever have a conversation that maybe she knew something that he didn't, which would be very normal. This would be a very normal conversation to have. Like, let's say John, because John was doing something in the bathroom allegedly when this was all going on. And so Patsy comes downstairs. What if Patsy saw something or picked up on something that John didn't? That could be huge. That could lead to the finding of the killer or whatever. The fact that they never had the conversation, it's the same idea of Burke in the first video where they never had this conversation with Burke about did he know something that they didn't? And obviously he did. And so here you have the same idea of really you never had a conversation that could have led to finding the killer of your daughter that never popped up once. And like, obviously the way I think of this is, well, yeah, you don't need to have this conversation if you already know what happened. It's the same thing with Burke. So I just find that really suspicious. I think that in any normal situation, you have a traumatic event that leads to a mystery on, you don't know who killed your daughter. There would be a lot of conversations had. There would be, a lot of emotion in terms of anger, of sadness, that all seem to lack from the Ramseys in terms of looking at that day and maybe trying to find something that they didn't, know happened that night. Nobody's willing to talk to each other in the family about things they might have saw that somebody else didn't or heard. It's just really weird.
Again, for us a while, which she was so thankful for. And see, originally,
I also want to point out, he didn't answer the question, by the way. I mean, he says no and then starts misdirecting the conversation into Patsy survived cancer, which is, it's amazing for her. That's great. But at the same time, it has nothing to do with this case or the interview.
our attorney said, look, this is nuts that you're even looked at as suspects.
Okay, nuts. Look at the statistics, look at the evidence. It's kind of obvious the Ramseys would be considered suspects if they did it, if they didn't do it.
But this will get resolved in a couple months. So, if you hire a heart surgeon, you better hire a good one.
Yeah.
It's going to be expensive, but it's only going to last a couple months.
Yeah.
And it lasted about 3 years.
Their legal team, if that's what they told them, this is only going to last a couple months, is wild. That is some absolute misdirection. Given that this is an unsolved case, you don't know who did it if it wasn't the Ramseys, and the amount of stuff against the Ramseys, and you thought it was only going to last a couple months, it took a couple months just to get an interview. Like, that's the wild part about this whole thing.
And we got to the point where we said, we're out of money. We can't keep paying. And they said, it doesn't matter. We're committed to getting this horrible wrong corrected. And so they worked on our behalf for
Lawyers made a
several
lot
years
of money from this case. A lot of money.
for no charge.
Oh, wow.
But we were out of money. Didn't matter.
When was that? Like, how long did it take to, like, burn through it?
A couple of years, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
What did they
I'd like to throw a pity party, but I just don't, just based on everything that happened in this case. But I will say this, we're getting into a really important part of the interview now. We're getting into the CNN interview, and Ashley's going to ask, what did they think about it? Do you have regrets about it? All that. This is another important part because a lot of the public, backlash and everybody turning against the Ramseys, a lot of it seemed to stem from the CNN interview.
think about you guys doing CNN?
Oh, that was a mistake. We shouldn't have done that.
Was that
Agree. I'm glad that he owns up to that and he goes, yeah, this is a bad idea. It was not in good taste given what was happening. But we'll see. We'll see what else he has to say.
like did they advise against it? Did they think that at the time?
They strictly advised. Well, we never asked them. We were back in Atlanta for the funeral, some of our Boulder friends were there, and they say, "Oh my God, the media's going crazy. You've got to show them that you're normal people, and Boulder's a wonderful place." They're really focused on making Boulder not suffer a reputational damage, nuts, but that was their focus.
That's weird though, right?
Oh, totally weird.
What was their goal? Like to
Okay, so let's break this down a little bit. So the idea, and this is what I pointed to in my documentary as well, is that the Ramseys wanted, in my opinion, to try and shape the narrative. They wanted to get ahead of public perception on the case. What the thing that backfired is when you have the Ramseys appearing the way they do on television, they didn't appear all that well. Two, you have the fact that they hadn't cooperated with police yet at this point. It just didn't come off all that well. And so there's really two lines of thinking here. You can go with the Ramseys, in which John is saying that it was a mistake. They kind of were led to believe this would be a good idea by their friends and all of that. Or you can go with the idea, which I much more believe, is that maybe their friends suggested it, but John also probably realized, yeah, if we can get public perception on our side, then we're in a good spot. I mean, there's a reason we've gotten so many different JonBenét Ramsey stuff, and even John Ramsey has been a part of some of those, is to kind of keep the focus on the police haven't done a good job and this DNA that is still unidentified. I think there's more to lean towards the idea that John is much smarter than people give him credit for in terms of trying to shape the way the public thinks about this case.
make Boulder look safe. Like I don't think it makes Boulder look good because you guys are saying there's a madman in Boulder.
Yeah. Well, and of course, Boulder was like, the authorities, the mayor at the time said, "Oh, nothing to worry about. There's no killer out there," because she'd been told by the police that us parents, we know it's the parents, we just got to prove it. And
I don't agree with that either. I mean, at this point, think about what the DA had been doing. So the DA, somebody that was a friend, basically, of the Ramseys, we know there were connections there, and there were obvious attempts. Ashley's going to bring this up in a little bit, so we'll talk about it when we get there about the DA specifically. But the idea that, they were just putting it on the parents because it made Boulder look safer just isn't the case. Now, I will say this with the DA. The DA did settle on tons of cases. The reason that Boulder had so little crime, which part of it is Boulder did have lower crime, but also is because the DA was not willing to really prosecute on anyone. And so that is going to come up as well with the Ramseys, because when we see that they could have gone to court and they were just straight up denied, even though the grand jury said that they should, it kind of leaks back into all of this.
it was weird. It was weird. But we shouldn't have been doing an interview like that.
Agreed?
What did
You
your
shouldn't have.
lawyers say when they because did they just see you on TV one day? Because I think that's the thing, people would be like, I don't understand. Like, John's a smart guy. He's consulting his lawyers for everything. How does his lawyers not know he's going on CNN?
I will say this. I think that the lawyers, even if they did know, they might have thought the same idea of John of, let's try and get the public on our side to put pressure on the police. It might have just backfired. So here John just might be giving the lawyers an out and just saying, it was their own mistake based upon their friends giving them advice, all that. So a lot of gray area we don't know. The main point of it is it was a mistake and it was just bad. And the legal team also, it didn't help their cause either.
At that time, we'd been introduced to our lawyers, but we then immediately flew back to Atlanta for John Renee's funeral. We had not met with our lawyers.
That's another big problem. So you flew back to Atlanta and you didn't even have conversations with your legal team about your defense and all that. That's another huge oversight.
Oh, okay.
It was a horrible mistake for several reasons. One, we were in no shape to do an interview. There's no point in doing an interview other than to satisfy our friends who are pressuring us to show us.
Why did they want you on TV so bad? That's a part that never made sense.
Well,
I totally get it from the friend's perspective. If you're from the friend's perspective and you're friends with these people, they're right now being alleged by maybe the public that they killed their own child, or at least one of them, or some, formation of these people killed their own daughter. So if you're the friends, you're sitting here, you're going, I don't want to be associated with people that are being alleged as being killers. How does that make me look? So I think it was people being a little bit more selfish and maybe thinking about their own situation, how they're going to be viewed. Like, think about it. For instance, we look at people and we go, you can, tell a lot about a person from the people that they hang out with. And if the person you hang out with is being alleged for murdering their own daughter, I can see why the friends would want them to go on this interview. It just backfired heavily. So, yeah.
They were concerned that the media was instantly piling on us as the killers.
And I will say this, I agree. I think the media definitely was out on against them from the very start. That I won't disagree with. I think the police is very different, but here I do agree. I think the media was already against the Ramseys, and them doing the interview was trying to counteract that, but it just added fuel to the fire.
And that was horribly wrong, and you need to show yourself and defend yourself.
Why are your friends like? I mean, I appreciate that they care for you, but it's just like.
Well, they don't know. They weren't any more expert at it than we were. And so we just reluctantly agreed to do it. But in retrospect, that's shouldn't have happened. And our attorneys, well, in fact, from that point on, our attorney said.
That's what's so jarring, though, is like John is able to sit here and go, yeah, in retrospect, it was a horrible idea. But then when we go with stuff like, should JonBenét have been doing beauty pageants? There's no, in retrospect, maybe that, if she hadn't been in that, we'd still have our daughter alive. Like, there's none of that, which is what drives me a little bit insane, because it's like he's willing to show like that they made mistakes, but just not stuff that is even more important, like JonBenét's safety. Stuff like that just bothers me.
No, you're not. We are not going to respond to the media accusations. You're not going to respond to them. We're going to defend you. In fact, they said, look, we will guarantee you one thing, money back guarantee, we'll destroy him in court. This will be a cakewalk.
I don't know if it would have been a cakewalk. I think that the idea that putting them in prison for killing their daughter, I don't think that would have ever gone anywhere. But the idea of getting the Ramseys on things like putting their daughter in a situation in which she was then murdered, or then covering up things like not allowing the police to do certain things, a lot of things that the grand jury came to think that they could charge the Ramseys on. I think that the Ramseys had a chance of being charged on one of those different things, maybe not all of them. But the idea would have been a cakewalk and they would have gotten scot-free. I disagree with. Now, the murder itself, I agree. I don't think they would have been charged for the murder. There's not undeniable proof on them. There's still reasonable doubt.
Gets to that point. But they said, we can't practice law in front of a CNN camera. That's not our job. We don't know how to do that. And they were frustrated by that because we were being accused in the court of public opinion, but they couldn't respond.
Because there seems like there was this huge rift that like I've not seen in such a stark way. I've seen it happen before, but between the DA's office and the police.
Oh, it was huge. The police were being stalled from doing anything. I mean, the simplest things like getting JonBenét's body so that they could do the medical report and they could do all that, it took way longer than it should have. Getting access to things from the Ramseys took forever. Even the things that were allowed for the Ramseys, some of that came from the DA's office. It just points to every single thing in this case is the DA defended or was trying to forestall the police on the Ramsey case, every single thing. And when you have ideas like the DA and some of, I think, the corruptness going back to cases before the Ramsey case, and then also looking at the connections that the Ramsey camp had with the DA, it just doesn't look natural. Like there's something wrong there that just doesn't smell right to me.
And it's you had lawyers who I think knew, they knew the DA kind of
And
grew
Ashley
up with
brings
them,
it
worked
up.
with them. Like, so I think that you guys obviously had an amicable relationship. They're the one you eventually go and talk to.
Right. I don't know. What I was told.
Again, tough question that Ashley's trying to get to the heart of, and he goes, I don't know. He's done that in part 1 and part 2.
The police were like, oh, we know who did it. Go arrest him and
I'm going to say this for the 5th time in this video. That's not what happened at all.
prosecute him. And the DA says, well, show me the evidence. Well, we don't have that much evidence. We just know that.
Okay, so I want to point this out. To get the things that the police wanted, so for instance, things like warrants or getting information on the Ramseys or background information, getting interviews, all you need is enough, just even little bit of evidence to say that they are suspects in the case. They had plenty of that. The Ramseys were the only people in the house that they know of outside of this maybe mysterious intruder. Everything came from inside the household that was done in the murder/kidnapping. They had plenty of evidence to at least look into the Ramseys, and this idea that it's a little bit is nonsense.
Did it. And so the DA wouldn't charge him. And the police took that as an offense. And apparently that happened a lot. That happened in our case.
I feel like there was like this circle where it was a lot of that, where I kept hearing like the DA's like, get the evidence. The police would say, and I don't know what's true, but the police would say, we're trying to get the evidence, but you're stalling us.
Right. No,
Like-
that's kind of what.
That's exactly what happened. I mean, the DA, and this is the thing, the DA would block them even when they had evidence. Like, the police had enough evidence to be able to get access to things that, again, let's bring it back to me. Let's say that I had been suspected of doing something, and they had even a little bit of stuff on me that maybe I was at the place of a crime. That's enough. That's enough for them to go through my phone records, to go through all this stuff. The fact that the Ramseys get so much protection is just baffling, because I would not be given the same amount of privileges that they do. That's what's, I think, so jarring for so many people, and I think that's why even John doesn't like being called rich. So, yeah, let's
Do you
continue.
feel like that, like, and I don't know what advice you were getting or what was happening, but I do see moments where there are certain things where I think, like phone records, like the police say they don't have phone records until like a year later.
Oh, no, we gave them everything they asked for when they asked for it.
That is just a lie. That they had certain things. So he's gonna look at things like handwriting, DNA, stuff like that. But Ashley's totally right. It took them a long time to get certain things from the Ramsey stuff, like phone records, like trying to figure out their purchasing history to see if they had purchased the rope, the nylon, all that kind of stuff. So Ashley is totally right, and John just goes, no, we gave him everything. That's not the case. That's a lie.
Early on, we gave them phone records, we gave them credit card records, full access to our bank accounts, everything. Everything they asked for. The only thing they asked for a year later, which they should have asked for
Yeah.
in the beginning, was our clothing that we were wearing.
If they would have asked that, they wouldn't have gotten it. John is acting like they were super cooperative with the police. They were not. They just weren't. They gave the bare minimum to the police that they could.
That morning, because they found unidentified fibers, pubic hairs were not identified. A year later, somebody said, oh, you should have asked for their clothing. Well, they finally did, and we had to show us a picture. I don't even remember what we were wearing. But we gave them everything they asked for, when they asked for it.
So when they asked for that interview, how come it took till April?
Handwriting samples. We had to write that horrible note right-handed and left-handed. So they had samples of our handwriting, which didn't match. So they wanted to arrest.
It's a lie. Patsy had almost a good majority of people said that it could have been Patsy, or it was most likely Patsy. What do you mean it wasn't a match? It was almost a good match to Patsy. She's the only person out of everybody that's ever been accused, suspected of doing anything. She's the only one that cannot be excluded from writing the note.
Justice.
Okay.
On probable cause. They probably did this, so let's arrest them and beat a confession out of them. In fact,
They had probable cause pretty easily. I mean, I don't know why we're going probable cause. Like, even if I was sitting here and I was going, I'm innocent, they had, I would even look at the situation and go, yeah, it doesn't look good for me.
we were told by the DA two things later, years later. The whole police case was based on they didn't think we acted right that morning.
No, it is not. Like, I don't know where John pulls these like fictions out of. And this is what drives me nuts, is because he's willing to talk down on other people, and he's willing to throw stuff like in the first part where all these people are making up fictions of stuff. And then he just throws stuff out here with literally no evidence, no backing, has nothing to it at all. And it's just wild to me. I don't know.
And the strategy to solve the case was to bring intense pressure on Patsy and I so the innocent one would confess.
So this is why they went to the Ramseys. So, because we skipped a lot of things. So the police went through every single person that was said to have possibly have been the person based on the Ramseys' own people they were saying could have done it, whether that was friends, people that worked for them, people at their company, especially, I mean, John's company specifically because of the bonus. Every person was cleared of the DNA, of having the handwriting sample match. Everyone was clear. They had an alibi, or they didn't know enough about the case for it to make sense, or the reaction didn't make sense. It came to the point where the police went through all of these, and based on, yes, the Ramseys' behavior during that morning, following how they weren't cooperating with the police, all of the evidence that points to them and makes it look very suspicious, the lack of evidence pointing to an intruder coming in. I mean, yeah, of course, by the time, we get, a couple days, weeks into this case, the last person to point the finger to is going to be the Ramseys.
What did they mean by you didn't act right? So, like, what were the things that were bothering
that's
them?
the interesting thing. I read that there was one detective there, this woman, who, I don't know if she'd ever investigated a murder or not, probably.
Linda Arndt, yeah.
She had not. She was very inexperienced. The Boulder police as a whole were not experienced with kidnappings or murders. So on that point of it, John's right. They were very inexperienced. But we're going to talk about now the behavior. And the behavior is very suspicious. It's something a lot of people, myself included, point to. So we'll see what John has to really talk about here.
Because she came when it was still a kidnapping, right?
Yeah. They went to the sheriff's office, got a book on how to deal with kidnapping. They didn't know. And I read her report much later, and it was just nuts.
Linda Arndt's report, I read it as well, is quite orderly. Like, it makes a lot of sense. And you got to remember, if you are somebody that you have an unsolved case, you're trying to remember as much as you possibly can. And yes, Linda Arndt might have had a bias at the point of when she did her report that she thought that Ramseys might have been involved. I read it. I thought it was pretty solid of a report, but I will say this. I think that John is right that I think this case really hurt Linda Arndt's mental health. I think that as the years went on, this case haunted her for the rest of her life. And so I don't disagree with the fact that I think Linda Arndt went a little off the rocker as the years went by, but I think that just saying, her police report is just, it's just fiction, it's just not true, or it's just off the rocker is a little crazy to me, because I thought it was well put together for the most part.
The things that she observed would say, yeah, that's not what you'd expect because of the way she wrote it. For example, she said, I observed him going casually through the mail, waiting for this phone call from the kidnapper.
So what's wrong with her saying this? Linda is supposed to be reporting on everything she sees. So if John is casually going through the mail, all that kind of stuff, that's what she should report. How is that wrong of Linda Arndt to do? She's trying to be as detailed as possible to finding any link to anything that's suspicious or anything that can help find who killed JonBenét. How is that being thorough? And, of all the times the police messed up in this case, this is not one where at least she was very thorough with everything that she was putting in her police report. The behavior of John and Patsy is very important.
I was looking for another communication for the kidnapper. We had a pile of mail that had come through the front door slot, laying on the floor. I was going through it to see if there's anything else from the kidnapper. She should have been doing that. But she interpreted it as casually going through the mail while waiting for a call to come in.
Why would Linda Arndt be going through your mail when she's the only detective, they're understaffed, and they know, like, based off the ransom note, if this is the case, it was a ransom, they're going to call you. They didn't say anything about sending you a letter. Why would you be looking they're not going to send you a letter. They're going to send you a phone call so that they can exchange JonBenét for the money. Again, just nonsense here. And the reason that he's trying to discount this is because Linda is showing that in a high pressure situation like this, John seemed very relaxed. He didn't seem on edge. He didn't seem emotional. He just seemed very casual, and that's kind of suspicious.
She also said 10 o'clock came and went. John didn't go nuts because we didn't get a call.
Let's see what his explanation to this is, because I also found this quite jarring. You get this idea that they're going to call you about your daughter at 10. Your whole day should be spent on this, preparing for this call. This is the hope of you getting your daughter back. This is the only chance that you have. And John didn't even care. John didn't act like he even noticed. It seemed like Linda Arndt was the only person that even noticed in the whole household that the call had gone by. So let's see what John's reaction is to this.
The note said, I will call you at 10 o'clock tomorrow. I didn't know if tomorrow was tomorrow or the day we were in. So when 10 o'clock came and went, I thought, oh my God, I got to wait another 24 hours for this call to come. So it wasn't a big surprise that he didn't call, because it said.
So the police have been coaching you up for this call that morning. Linda Arndt specifically walked you through. You had a script on what to read from. The note was left, you would assume, in the middle of the night. And if you're basing it off of it's the middle of the night, the next day would be the next day. The only way it makes sense for you to think about it being not the day of the kidnapping or murder would be if you wrote the note at like 3 a.m. and you're going, well, technically tomorrow wouldn't be today, it would be the next day. That's the only thing that makes sense. And so a lot of people pointed to the idea that, okay, if Patsy or John wrote this note, well, then they would be thinking, yeah, tomorrow wouldn't be today, it'd be the next day after. So that's what's really suspicious about here, is because that doesn't make any sense. The idea that you're sitting here going, oh, it might be tomorrow. Oh, well, not a big deal.
Tomorrow in the note. What was the other thing? It was just nuts. Oh, when he found JonBenét, he didn't cry. There was no tears.
That part I don't really think is that big of a deal. I mean, we all react differently to things. Like, I found my grandfather dead more or less already. I didn't cry. I didn't cry for a very long amount of time. I went through more of a shock state of non-belief, which is what I think is very common with people. So I don't think that that's a major thing that we should be pointing to with John's behavior.
People react differently to trauma, but
Totally agree.
when I lost my daughter Beth in a car accident, JonBenét's older sister, I was mad. I didn't cry. I was mad. Why did this happen? I was mad at God with Beth. And
I totally get that. People
JonBenét,
respond to trauma way differently.
And what I guess they didn't understand was when they're making these observations of our behavior. When I lost Beth, I got a call. It was over. I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't get her to the best medical treatment. I couldn't go by her side and comfort her. It was over. It was done. She was gone. With JonBenét, it wasn't over. I could get her back, and I really thought I would.
But this is the thing that drives people nuts, is you see John Ramsey talking about this, like he was committed to trying to get her back and that she was possibly still alive and all this stuff. But then once, this is over and we find that she has been murdered, he just completely shuts the police out. Like, he doesn't go gung-ho, like telling the police everything he possibly can about who might have done this or doing an interview or any of that, trying to clear himself. Like, he doesn't do any of that. And that's what's so frustrating.
But I had to keep my wits about me, and I had to keep my head together and do whatever I could possibly do, not knowing what to do.
Which is actually how I think I would respond to a traumatic situation, is I'm very jump in and act.
Yeah.
The thing that I think other people don't understand, that this is the one that was hard for me, is it's said over and over by Linda Arndt that you and Patsy are just completely separated.
I kind of have a tough time on that one, because I could totally see a situation where both of them are reacting completely differently to how this happened. So Patsy's having a complete breakdown, and then you have John, who's a bit more composed, who's more focused on, it would seem, JonBenét. But at the same time, your daughter has been killed, or not killed, at this point she was kidnapped. You think the two would take comfort in each other and support each other. And so them being separate, a lot of people, especially if you're a believer of one of the theories where one of the parents did it and maybe the other had to help them, the idea that maybe they were, maybe a little mad at each other, or maybe they didn't want to see each other because of what had just happened, because of JonBenét's death and what had maybe happened. Even if you believe the Burke theory, the way I believe it happened is that likely John actually had to finish off JonBenét in like a really tragic way, as Burke had already hit her or something along those lines, allegedly. If you're a mother and you still have to look at, your husband and go, even if it was a mercy, even if it had needed to be done, he still killed your daughter. I could see the idea that that's why they were kind of separate, and even why Patsy was more distraught than she already was. So I can see the idea of this, fitting into the theories, but I can also see this idea just being, more of an innocent idea. So I think of all the behaviors of John and Patsy, this is the one that doesn't bother me as much. I still think it is suspicious, but I think there's other things that are a bit more suspicious in this case.
What's your
Well,
interpretation of
Patsy
that?
was literally sitting on the floor with a big bowl in front of her, ready to throw up. Quite honestly, she was devastated. And so she was over there, that's fine, that's okay. I was focused on trying to get JonBenét back.
The thing that bothers me, though, is like just knowing my own parents. So if this was the case with my mom and dad, my dad would be supporting my mother because, well, that's his wife. Like, they're the closest anyone, will be. And so you not really being there for her at all while she's so upset that she might throw up. It's just a little weird. Like why wasn't John there for his wife? Like, he seems to be completely off doing his own thing. It just rubs you the wrong way.
How do I get the money together? He wanted $118,000 in an attaché case. How do I get the cash together? I was working on that. I got to get my daughter back. That was my focus. Patsy's okay.
She's got friends around her.
She had friends around her. I got to get my daughter back.
That was the other thing Linda said.
And so I get that, but I just think about it like this. So when my grandfather died, the way it worked was, okay, so my grandmother, she was still alive at this point, and so my mom and my aunt, who were her daughters, they were the people that were really helping my grandmother. They stayed the night with my grandmother, like slept in the same bed with her, tried to comfort her. Like, they were the closest that my grandmother had. So they were where, my grandmother leaned for support. And so I look at the situation and I go, John saying Patsy's okay while she's lying on the floor, she's about to throw up or whatever, and just saying, she's got friends, she'll be fine. It's just a weird thing to say when your wife is struggling through probably the most dramatic thing she's ever experienced in her life, and you're nowhere near, you're not present. And I get the idea of, like, you want to find your daughter, but not at any point. There's no point that we have this idea that John goes to Patsy and, hugs her and says, it's going to be all right. We're going to find our daughter. I'm going to try to find her somehow. That never happens. They were completely separate the whole time. It's just, it doesn't seem normal, like how you would expect people to react. But then trauma is a thing. You never know how people are. It's just a whole mess.
In her interpretation of things, that you disappear for an hour.
That's not true.
That is 100% true. If the detective cannot find you and you were supposed to be waiting at the phone and you're just wandering off, you have disappeared.
Yeah.
No. I was looking out the window occasionally to see if I could see anything. But no, I didn't disappear for an hour.
Then how did Linda Arndt not see you? Like, if you're just looking out the window and you didn't go off some random place in the house, I don't know. It's just another suspicious thing.
She, on national television, said, well, I knew he was guilty because I saw it in his eyes. I thought, well, that's quite a talent.
And don't get me wrong, I think Linda was definitely off her rocker as time passed from this case. But at this point, I didn't see any indication that Linda Arndt was like a crazy person at this stage. So, I don't know. I don't agree. I think John's right to an extent. Like, Linda going on national television and going, I saw it in his eyes and all this stuff. It's kind of like, I don't know, but I don't know. I think there's some gray area here where Linda Arndt could, definitely have lost a bit of her mental faculties because of this case, but not during it. Like, in the middle, I just don't think that's the case.
But she was way in over her head. And
I do agree as well. Linda Arndt was not the right person.
I don't think
for the
she's
case.
playing with a full deck.
Aside from that first day, did you ever do other interviews with her or have much interaction with her?
None.
Did her and Patsy end up having a relationship with some kind?
Well, she was our savior. I mean, she came to help us. You call the police, you expect them to come to help. we trusted her initially before we'd seen this report, all these crazy observations. And so she was
Crazy
kind of our
observations.
policeman personified. We didn't know any of these other people that had come involved from the police department, but Linda was there that morning when we had this horrible tragedy in our lives. So it's kind of a bonding in a way.
So did they, like, even after that, her and Patsy had conversations afterwards? 'Cause
They had a few.
Okay, yeah.
I will say this part of the interview is kind of weird to me. Like, I don't see what the point of Linda and Patsy having any type of relationship means. Like, maybe the idea that if John killed JonBenét, then maybe Patsy was like bonding with Linda because Linda knew that, or Linda thought that he did. Like, it just doesn't really go anywhere. So this part of the interview I'm not all that interested in, to be honest. So I do want to let you guys know I did skip a couple minutes. They just continue talking about Linda Arndt and this kind of relationship that maybe her and Patsy had, just talking about the case. Very surface level stuff. Doesn't really matter all that much to me. They then talked about the possible idea of another suspect in Gary Oliva. There's basically been no evidence of that being the person that did it at this point. There's nothing that would confirm them saying that this is the person. They don't fit the DNA or any of that idea. So as of right now, I skipped over that portion because it's a suspect that doesn't matter to the case because there's nothing tying them to the case at this point. But at this point, we're going to get into now, as the case developed and we went through the years, the popular theory has become that Burke did it. It's what I believe. It's what I've seen a number of other major creators believe. I'd say it's the leading theory as of right now. I think when it was much closer to the case, it was a lot more the idea that either John or Patsy did or some combination. I think now as time has gone on and more information's come out about this case, Burke has gotten older. I think especially the Dr. Phil interview, people now believe it was Burke. So we're going to talk about that here. It was talked about in the first part as well, but Ashley's going to bring it back up, given its cultural relevance at this point of this case.
Yeah, it seems like there were these like cultural shifts. I think there was like that distinct moment in 2016 when everyone started looking at Burke, and that's become like the big story now.
That's absolutely insane. Burke was.
So John has to say this. It's just insane that he killed her or any of this stuff. And it's why I point to the idea of like, okay, well, John proposes his own theories that have no merit, have absolutely no theory backing. Like, there's no facts to the theories he's presenting. And then anybody points anything else that differs from his story, and he's like, it's nonsense, it's insanity, whatever. I know he has to because it's his son, all that stuff. But the evidence points to the idea that Burke did much more than what the Ramseys are telling us, and they've been extremely secretive about him. So let's continue to see what John says about Burke.
Was a 60-pound, 9-year-old little boy. This was a sexual assault, a violent assault.
Again, I will say the sexual assault is something that I still don't know how that factors into this case. I don't know if it was an intruder that sexually assaulted her, or if it was somebody in the family that was abusing her, or if it was somebody else not known to the family was abusing her, like a doctor, like I don't know, right? Somebody else could have been abusing her that we just don't know of. It's a massive wild card in this. It could be completely unrelated to this case. We just don't know. But the fact of the matter is, Burke could have killed her with a flashlight that is very suspicious. Everybody kind of denies having from the Ramsey household, even though other people outside of the family say this is their flashlight. And if somebody was able to, like Burke, smash it on her head the way Burke basically indicated in his interview early on in the following like weeks or whatever after JonBenét was killed, it definitely could have killed her. Remember, JonBenét is a small girl. Like, yes, Burke might be 60 pounds and might be smaller, but JonBenét is also smaller. She's much more fragile. Something as simple as, hitting her across the head with a very heavy-duty flashlight could kill her, or at least make her brain dead to an extent and then die later. So the idea that we're just dismissing it as like, oh, this could have never possibly happened, I just disagree with.
Even the police immediately said no. He was interviewed by a child psychologist,
The police did not say no. The police believe that it was more to do with that the parents, however it happened, one of them killed her and then covered it up. That's what they believed happened, which is still the truth. If you want to go with the Burke theory is still, for me, that John Ramsey is the person that actually killed her. not Burke. Burke is the person that made her brain dead to the point that she was going to die at some point. John is the person that actually killed her with the garrote, but she was already brain dead. She basically wasn't conscious at this point. All that stuff. So yeah, I just want to point that out here.
I guess is normal for 2 days early on, and they said no, absolutely no way. He wasn't aware of anything that happened, and
that's a lie, because we know in the Dr. Phil interview, Burke says he went back downstairs. John did not know that. That's information that he did not know. So we do know, even if he wasn't involved in the murder, that he knows information that John did not know. And at the time, the police did not know either.
certainly wasn't the killer. And so that's just absurd foolishness.
What was your thinking that morning when you're getting him out of the home? Because I know you guys go to check on him. You think he's still sleeping. He says when he does his Dr. Phil that he's awake, but he's, clearly there's something going on. He's like, I'm not messing with it. I just am like waiting till they come and get me. Why did you guys want him to not be in that environment?
This is a massive question. A lot of the Burke theory looks at how do the parents treat Burke? How do they go about this situation? So if you even want to think about the McCann case, which is the one I'm probably going to cover after this one, it'll be probably a while from now because I still got to do all my research on it. The JonBenét documentary took probably a good month to edit. There's a lot that goes into this that you guys maybe don't see, but the one thing that was very apparent in that McCann case was the mother is very protective then of the other two children that she had outside of the one she lost. That is more of what I would expect from someone like Patsy or someone like John, that you would want to protect Burke at all costs. Somebody kidnapped your child in the house. And so you'd want to keep them as protected as possible. You'd want them to always be with you, never out of your eyesight. You want to protect them. And so we're going to see here what John thinks on that idea.
Well, the police were there. It was craziness. He was a little boy. We wanted him safe and protected. And he took some of his Christmas presents with him and went to stay with a friend.
But here's what's so crazy. He just says, okay, we wanted Burke to stay safe. He was a young kid. And I totally get that. I totally understand wanting him to not be involved with everything that just happened. But you would think you would want to keep him close to you or with the police, because somebody just came into your home and stole your child. You don't know who it could be. It could be one of your friends. As much as you don't want to believe that, it could be somebody that you know that took your daughter. So just sending your child off where you're not with them, the police are not with them, is just incredibly, how is that possible? Like, why would you send your child away from you after you just lost your other child? It just makes no sense to me.
In his house.
It makes sense if you're trying to hide him from the police, though.
It was a way to get him out of this nightmare into a safe place.
Did you guys feel like he was safe? I think that was it hard? Because I think it would be hard for me to I'm missing one child. Like, I don't know if you could get me to let go of the other one.
Yeah, well.
That's exactly how I feel like 99% of people would react.
Oh, no, we trusted our friends. They were good friends. Their son was Burke's age. They were buddies. They'd been friends for a long time. It was a safe place for him to go.
So you are working under the assumption that there is somebody out there that kidnapped your daughter, all that stuff. They know you personally based off of the ransom note, all that kind of stuff. What makes you think they don't know where your friends are and would take your other child? That could maybe boost up the ransom, or it could, insult or publicly take a shot at John. Whatever you think, if you believe it was an intruder, the motivation was, you can then also take Burke as well. Under no circumstance would I take Burke out of my line of sight or out of being protected by the police. Under no circumstance. Because then, think about what just happens after this. John basically starts turning on all of his friends. He starts accusing multiple of his friends of possibly being the person that did it. And yet, he trusted his friends so much.
Did they have, because Fleet took him away, but then Fleet comes back, right? Were his in-laws or something at the house? So there was someone there with the kids? 30 years ago.
Yeah, I don't.
Every hard question, that is a great question. So if you are your last, not your last for John, but I mean, if John and Patsy's in the household, your child, the last one of them's been kidnapped, wouldn't you think it'd be vital to know who is, watching them? You're in the middle of your daughter has been ransomed or kidnapped and then is going to be ransomed. You don't know. What do you mean you don't know?
I don't know.
I understand Ashley has to be very cordial to get this interview, to get answers, get this to be, an interview. And this did really great for his channel, which is great because it was really well shot and really well done. This is one of those times where I wish there was an interviewer that would press him on stuff like this. I don't think that he would give them a good answer anyway. I think Ashley did multiple times, just tried to ask him questions like multiple times, but just through different ways. Like even the Burke stuff. She asked John like 5 different times, did Burke know something? And he just said no. And so she kind of brought it up again and he's kind of said no. So I just kind of wish somebody would start going like, okay, here's the facts. What do you say to this? Instead of kind of giving him an out like, oh yeah, it's 30 years ago, move on. It's like, I'd like to see him trying to answer stuff like this.
It was chaos that morning. And
here we go. It was
I
chaos
really
again.
thought I could get JonBenét back. I really did.
All right, that's where we're going to stop. I think we got through a good amount of material. I don't know how much of the rest of this interview I'm going to cover. If you guys like this as well, then I'll definitely try to finish it out. I only want to do one more part on this. I think personally, we're probably going to skip the next couple sections, like the Fleet White and the theory section here. But then we'll talk about the theories and then do the DNA evidence, which is the thing that John is the most, trying to advocate for, to put pressure on the police to find who this unidentified DNA is. So I wanted to say a massive thank you for you guys if you got to the end of this and watching the documentary. Again, if you want to hear my full extended thoughts, check out the documentary. I put a lot of time into it, a lot of effort, a lot of work. And so this is kind of just some supplemental content to kind of look at that and also just have some regular uploads while I then work on my next case, which will probably be the McCann case. So thank you guys for all watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.